Space Patrol. It's your boy Icon going over episode 7? 7, 6, or 7? 7. I believe it's 7. Actually, no, 6. Episode 6. So, Space Patrol. When we last saw, not Jane, what's his girl name? Dorothy had basically wished an all-out assault on the underground. She killed Baby Doll, she killed the Protector, and that put the whole underground in shambles, and everybody was trying to pick up the pieces. Dorothy, after she realized what she had done, she ended up, she freaked out, and she basically stole Niles' spaceship, because apparently Niles has a spaceship, and she jumped in the spaceship, and Dorothy flew to outer space to get away from humanity. Meanwhile, Jane is in the underground, like trying to pick up the pieces, and all the other, personalities are sitting there trying to figure out what they're supposed to do. So they end up coming up with this idea of basically giving the two girls a funeral and burying them in the well. Jane wasn't really feeling the well idea, and she, because the whole thing is the girl that they keep saying, the girl Kay. Kay is here's from what I gather, Kay is basically Jane's childhood innocence before it was taken by her. We'll just call it what it is. Her her pedophile rapist father. So because the father who sexually abused her as a child, that's the demon that lives in the well. So now that Baby Doll and the Protector, now that they're both gone, they were going to take their bodies and put their bodies in the well. And you're basically sacrificing those two personalities to the evil entity that, that you're all trying to protect the girl from, because that's what all those personalities are for. All those personalities are there to protect Kay, protect the girl, from the sexual predator, which is her dad, because that little girl represents the last piece of Jane's innocence, and that's what they're all trying to hold on to. So Jane, obviously, she wasn't feeling the whole idea of chucking them in the well, because you're basically feeding them, to this predator. So, but they were just like, well, nobody, and then plus Jane was just like, we don't know how the underground works. We don't know how the spirit thing works. We don't know how these personalities work. For all we know, after some time, they could all be rejuvenated, they could all heal, and then the two of them could eventually get better. She was like, we don't know that, so she was just like, I don't want to sacrifice them yet. So, but the others, they resisted the whole thing. They were just like, no, this is what we're gonna do. So Jane ended up actually talking to the girl. She went to Kay, and she spoke to Kay directly, and she told Kay, she was just like, listen, I'm the primary, I'm responsible for everybody. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And then she was like, tell me what. She's like, she told Kay, she was like, tell me what I'm supposed to do. And then Kay was just like, well, you're the primary, that's your job. She's like, every single person, every personality has a job. Everybody has a role to play. Your role is to be primary, because your role is to know what we're supposed to do. So, so Jane runs back to the well. She tells everybody, she's like, listen, she's like, I'm primary, damn it. And I think this is a bad idea, and I don't think we should do it. She's like, we're not going to sacrifice him. And then after that, Miranda, because Miranda was, and this whole thing's starting to make a little bit more sense to me now, because Miranda, if I'm not mistaken, Miranda was basically the personality that was present when Kay was going through the sexual abuse, and I guess because she couldn't take it, and because it was traumatizing for her, and because she was emotionally destroyed, Miranda was the one who tried to kill herself by throwing herself down the well. But earlier in the season, the other personalities, when they were trying to get rid of Jane, they were trying to get Jane to step down as primary. They kept suggesting, they were just like, oh, you should let Miranda take over. And and now that I realize, if Miranda's the personality that tried to kill herself because of the sexual abuse, why would they want Miranda to take up? You talk about someone who's not mentally stable. Miranda's the one that definitely shouldn't be primary. But and again, and now that the wheels are turning, Miranda's the bad guy. And it was a very beautiful girl, the beautiful black woman who's playing Miranda. I'm gonna be real mad because, and as far as I can tell, like Miranda's the only black personality that Jade has. So I'm gonna be really mad if Miranda does turn out to be the villain. But the pieces are all being put together. Like Miranda got into the heads of the other personalities. She Miranda was the one who tried to get the other personalities to remove Jane as primary. Miranda wants to be primary. Miranda wants to take over. Why Miranda wants to take over, I have no idea. What her end game is, I have no idea. But even then, when Miranda came out of the well to address everybody, she said to everybody, she was like, yes, she could, because Jane was just like, we need to give these two time to see if they can be reborn, be rejuvenated. And then Miranda showed up and she was like, for someone who's never been in the well, you seem to know an awful lot. And then Miranda was just like, oh, take these two bodies and throw them down the well, and then eventually they will be reborn. And then I was just like, that doesn't make sense to me. And then when they put the bodies in the well, there was like this whole boom, like, destruction thing happening. And then everybody was like, what's that noise? And then Miranda was like, don't worry, that's just their like their spots. Because everybody has like I guess like a home, like a spot. Like Baby Doll plays in the grass. Like Hammerhead has a jail cell. Like everybody has like has a space, has an area. So she was just like, oh, that's their space, that's their areas collapsing. And I'm like, why would their areas collapse if they're gonna be reborn? It doesn't make sense. And then Miranda came over. She went to Jane, and then she said, if you'll kindly step aside, I'll step aside as primary. She was like, I'll show you exactly what the girl wants. And that was like the ultimate villain setup line that I've ever heard. Because first of all, Jane just spoke to the girl. Jane had a flat out conversation with Kay. Kay told Jane to her face, it's your job to know what to do because you're primary. That doesn't so for Miranda to be like, I'll show you what the girl wants. Kay just told you what she wants. She wants Jane to be primary and to make all the decisions. So Jane's being set up. Miranda's evil. Even when and Jane ended up stepping aside too, because she ended up letting Miranda take over. So because Jane was in a coma, in the real world. And then when Miranda took over, she sat up, and then she, her hair was all long and everything, and she had like this devious look on her face. So Miranda evil. And Jane's going to end up fighting Miranda at the end of the season, and it's going to end with Jane throwing Miranda down the well. I can see that shit coming right now. Rita and Larry, because remember, like in the last episode, Larry's son basically betrayed him, and the negative spirit took Larry and Rita off to God knows where. The two of them ended up getting off the bus. When they got off the bus, I guess they were back in town. They were close to the mansion. So Larry was just kind of like trying to cope with the whole thing about, the fact that his family basically just betrayed him. Rita was just like, well, you go handle that, Larry. I have a play to do, because, remember in the last episode, like she got the call to do that play. So Rita goes off to do the play. Larry goes home. Rita shows up at the play. She's meeting all the actors and the actresses. She thinks that she's doing a play. Like the name of the play is called Our Town. Rita thinks it's a play from, I guess, from like an old play from back in the day. And she was like, like I've seen that play 1,000,000 times and I know its ins and outs. But then one of the girls told her, she was like, no, we're not doing that old school joint. She was like, this is called Our Town, which is they're doing a play reenactment from the first 2 episodes of Doom Patrol when the whole gang, like Cliff, Rita, Jane, and Larry, when they all went to town for the first time, and then Rita ended up freaking out and turned into a blob and almost killed the town. One of Jane's personalities like grew up and almost torched everything. Like the negative spirit came out of Larry. So they're basically doing a play, reenacting the first 2 episodes of Doom Patrol. So Rita's like completely freaking out because because obviously she lived it. And the girl that she was talking to ended up playing her, and because he asked her, she was like, "What role are you playing?" And she was like, "Oh, I'm playing the Blob Lady." And then Rita was like, "Oh God!" So so after the rehearsal and everything was over, Rita was talking to the girl, and then she was just like, "Oh, what's your motivation?" And then the girl basically read Rita's card, like from top to bottom. She was just like, "Oh, my motivation for the blob lady is," she was like, "I used to be a horrible person, and I was selfish. I wanted people to see me, like I wanted all the attention, and now that I'm a blob, I'm afraid people will see me as a monster, not the person that I want to be, and I'm no longer attractive. Like guys don't want to bang me." And then Rita was just sitting there like, dear, like it was almost like you could hear Rita's like teeth gritting the whole time the girl is saying all that. And she was just like, "Oh, I'm trying to," and then Rita got mad, and then she was just like, she basically called that girl. She was like, "That's like her nemesis," and then Rita got mad and walked away. So it'll be pretty interesting to see how this whole play thing unfolds, because it's actually pretty funny. I mean, again, like I like Rita, so like anything Rita does, like I'm all here for it. Larry, he was back at the house, and when Larry got back to the house, Chief and Cliff were basically trying to find Dorothy. Cliff found Jane, like in a coma. And then Niles was just like, "Forget Jane for the moment. We have to find my daughter." And then Cliff was just like, "Fuck your daughter." He was like, "I'm on Team Jane." And then he was like, "My daughter went to outer space, Cliff." And then Cliff had given him like the finger that he found, so he can like try to help him get his sensitivity back. And then Niles was just like, "Cliff, you will get no help from me unless you help me find my daughter." So they were just like, so Cliff was like, "All right, fine." He's like, "So where's your daughter?" He's like, "So where do you think your daughter is?" He was like, because Cliff, not Cliff, Niles, he found a note that Dorothy wrote. The note basically said she was just like, "Oh, like I hurt Jane, so I can't be trusted. I'm going to outer space." Um, Cliff was just like, so Cliff agreed to go to outer space, but he was like, "How are we getting outer space?" Come to find out, Niles has a spaceship, and then Cliff was just like, but wait, hold up." He's like, "But you said you had a spaceship. Your daughter took the spaceship and went to outer space." He's like, "You have two spaceships?" And then he was like, "Yes, Cliff, I created space travel." He's like, "You created space travel and you still can't give me feeling in my hands," and like all that other stuff. So they go to outer space. And the whole time they're in outer space, Cliff is basically like talking a lot of shit about Dorothy. He was calling Dorothy stupid. He was just like, "Fuck Dorothy." He was like, like "Screw your kid." And you could tell like Niles was getting pissed, with how Cliff was talking about his daughter. So they get to, that's when he got mad, and he was just like, "If you speak one more ill word against my daughter, I will not help you." So then, so they get to the moon. Like Dorothy went to the moon of all places, and because Cliff has a robot body, as a metal body, like obviously like the lack of oxygen. I mean, I assume oxygen needed to get to his brain. I don't know how that worked, but we'll just say that because he's a robot, he didn't need to breathe in outer space, and he was just able to walk around on the moon like it was all gravy. So Dorothy's on the moon. She got a spacesuit on, and she's talking to the evil manifestation. So now the manifestation is talking a little bit more normal. He's speaking fast, more fast. Because before he was just like, "Dorothy, make wish." And now he's more like, "Yes, so we did what we needed to do, and we need to do more of it." And then even Dorothy was just like, she was like, "Why do you sound different?" And then he was just like, as you get, he's like, he said, as you get older, so do I. He was like, "And as you grow, I grow." And then she was just like, "I'm not grown, I'm a child." And he was like, "Nah, you got to grow up at some point." Because the entity's whole thing is he wants Dorothy to grow up. And I feel like whatever Niles did to keep Dorothy a child, the thing about it is Dorothy's innocence, as her childlike innocence, is what's keeping this manifestation at bay. If Dorothy's a kid, the manifestation will be a kid, or the manifestation will be stupid, or it won't be fully developed. As Dorothy gets older, the manifestation will become older. And if Dorothy becomes an adult, the manifestation, because it's like, it's different. Like when you're a kid, you're very carefree. When you're adult and you know the pains of the world, and what horrors the world can bring. Because imagine if Dorothy was like 18 years old and she had a boyfriend and the guy like broke her heart or whatever. The man, as an adult, you would want to extract revenge on people. You'd want to make people suffer, because you're suffering, and the manifestation would be too well conscious to and too willing to make that happen, because they'll be making the whole thing about like make the wish. They'll be making wishes left and right because they're just emotionally unstable. So I think the whole thing about Dorothy being a child is just to keep her keep her a kid to keep that evil manifestation like, like locked down. So, so Cliff finds her, she's sitting there talking, and then Dorothy's like, I'm just gonna stay on the moon forever. And then he was just like, well, that ain't gonna work because the oxygen gonna run out. And then Cliff ended up warming up to the girl, like he talked to her, and he was just like, look, he was like, the whole house, the whole Doom Patrol Manor is full of people that did bad things and people that are trying to find themselves. It's like, you're no different than that. You just got to be a part of it and just embrace it. And with us around you, like as family, we can help you come to terms with what your personal situation is. So then Dorothy came around, and her and Cliff went back to the spaceship. So they get on the spaceship, and they're sitting there, headed back to Earth. Dorothy goes to sleep. Niles and Cliff have a nice little conversation. Cliff basically was just like, you know what? He was just like, I know I was talking a lot of shit about your kid, but the girl needs help. And if you're going to die soon, Niles, the girl's going to need a support system. She's going to need people around her. She's going to need to be safe. And then he was like, I'll volunteer for that. He was like, I'll be there for your daughter, and I'll help protect her, And then Niles was just like, Cliff, that means the world to me, but you're not going home. And then he pressed the button, and it shot Cliff out of the spaceship, and Cliff is now like floating in outer space. And I was just like, wow, he flat out betrayed him. And I don't know if Niles, there's two reasons why I think Niles did that. One, he was basically just mad at Cliff for talking all that shit about his kid, and he just was just like, you know what, fuck Cliff. I just need Cliff to help me get my kid back, and then like he's expendable. Or maybe someone has taken control of Niles, because I saw in the coming attractions for the next episode, Mr. Nobody is being referenced again. So Mr. Nobody's apparently making a comeback. Maybe Mr. Nobody took over Niles, and Mr. Nobody was the one that shot Cliff in outer space. Or maybe Niles is just being a dick. Like Niles is just being an ass, and he's just like, fuck Cliff. And then Niles basically just tried to kill Cliff because he was talking shit about his kid. That's pretty much what I think happened. But we shall see. We'll see what happens. But yeah. But as they say, Niles is a bad man. So now Larry stayed behind, because when they were talking about going to outer space to go get Dorothy, conveniently a spaceship landed on the front porch. And the spaceship was full of these three people, one Russian girl and these two dudes. They said that they were coming to the house to see Niles. When they got to the house and Larry answered the door, and they were like, oh, we're here to see Niles. Niles and Cliff took off in their spaceship, and they were like, we just missed him. So, and Niles knew they were there, but he was just like, stole them. I'm going to save my child, So Larry ended up talking to them. And, while Larry, like the girl, like the Russian girl, she was the more comprehensive out of everybody else. The other two guys were basically acting like kids, and like her and Larry shook hands, and then the girl started glowing, and then Larry's like spirit started glowing, and then he was like, wow, like you have the negative spirit in you too. And then she was just like, yeah, because basically before, about 5-7 years before Larry had his accident, Niles sent those three people into outer space because he wanted them to collect that negative energy, because Niles was going to use it for immortality. The girl, she was the one that went out to try to collect some of that energy for studying purposes. And just like with Larry, the energy consumed her. She said she stayed in quarantine for 5 years, but she got to know her negative spirit, and her spirit are, like they're one entity now. It's no longer the Russian girl and the spirit. She keeps referring to herself as we now, because she was just like, we came together. And then Larry was like, wow, like it took you 5 years to master harmony with your spirit. And then she was just like, yeah, how long did it take you to master yours? He was like, bitch, I still ain't do that shit. So but to be fair to Larry, the girl was in outer space for like decades, and she was quarantined for 5 years. If you're quarantined for 5 years in outer space, you got plenty of time to make peace with your inner spirit. So and then she said that because they were trying to collect those samples, it took them too far away from Earth. They lost contact with Niles and everybody else, and then like nobody ever heard from them again. So Niles basically wrote them off because they lost contact, and then Niles tried again when he set up Larry Trainer's ship so Larry could end up getting the negative energy, himself. So that's how that whole thing happened. And then then we come to find out that the two guys who were basically like acting like complete goofs, she said that they got possessed by these space spores, and the spores basically like infected their bodies. And what we see now is basically just like a manifestation of like whatever piece of them is left, which is them just like repeating the same things over and over again, acting stupid, running around in circles, acting like kids. And the Russian girl even said, she said that the reason why we came back here was because the Earth's atmosphere we figured out that the Earth's atmosphere would kill those spores within these two people. And then Larry was like, "Oh, so you came here to kill these two guys to finally put them out of their misery." Because what the Russian girl was doing, because she's convinced now that her and her spirit are one, she's trying to sever ties with her old life. So she's trying to put her old life behind her so she can move forward. So that means allowing her fellow spaceship teammates to die finally, so she can put that to rest. And that happened. You could tell like the spores ended up dying. The two dudes were dying, and they buried them in Doom Manor, like in the front yard. And when they put the two bodies in the yard and they started burying them, the girl actually told Larry, she was like, "By the way, if if fruit ends up growing where you bury these two," she's like, "Don't eat that shit." And then Larry was like, "So what's the next thing that you're gonna do?" And she was like, "Well, I'm gonna go back to my old hometown, so I can see how things have changed, so I can see how people have forgotten me over the years." Because she said that now that I've buried like my two partners, she said that going back home to see how my town and my life turned out after I disappeared, she said that'll be the last tie I'll have to my old life, and I can be completely free to move forward. Larry was just like, he was just like, "I appreciate that," but he was like, for me, he was like, "I'm not going to sever ties with everybody." He's like, "I'm going to try to make amends, and I'm going to go see my family, and I'm going to try to rectify that whole situation." And I'm glad he did that, because I said in the last episode, like, I hope he actually does try to do that. So Larry's going to go try to make amends, and him, the negative spirit, seem to be working okay to be on like a better path and a better situation. And then finally, Cyborg. He was I cannot remember this girl's name that he's having sex with. So the two of them are, they're having pillow talk, and she basically told him, they were talking about, he told her, because she asked him about why he has PSD, because she was like, because you're too chicken to say what happened in group. She was like, "You might as well tell me." So he was just like, "All right," he was just like, this evil entity called, like, this super villain called Mr. Nobody put thoughts in my head, made me beat the shit out of my dad. There was like a donkey, an alternate universe, Danny the street. And then she was just like, "Oh God." And he was just like, "See, that's why I don't want to say anything in group," because he's like, "Nobody gonna believe me." And then they were talking more about, like her situation and her enhancements. Like Cyborg scanned her entire body about where her enhancements were. And he found out that because of basically the girl was like the original Cyborg, because she had enhancements, she had like guns, she had weapons on her. And Cyborg found out that a lot of the tech that was built into her system ended up leaking poison into her body, and it's slowly killing her. So obviously now that Cyborg likes the girl and he knows that she's poisoned, he's like, "Look, obviously I'm half man, half robot, so maybe I can figure out how to stop this poison and save your life." So he ends up hacking the government to look up the schematics of, how she was built, how she was put together. And when he looked all that up, he found out that Niles Coulter and Star Labs, which is where his dad works, did a joint project on putting all the tech into this girl. So his dad and Niles is responsible for what happened to her. And I was like, that's how we get Cyborg back in the mansion. So because so far Cyborg's been doing his own separate thing, for the whole season. So I'm like, so that's how we get him back in there. So he called his dad and he was just like, "Yo, can you look up this thing for me?" Because he was like, Star Labs. He's like, Star Labs and Niles Coulter did some stuff on this girl that I'm talking to. And then he was like, "Aha, son, you met a girl." And then he was just like, "Yo, son, don't worry about that. Just worry about getting to know the girl." And he was like, "No, Dad." He was like, "I need you to look into this for me." And he was just like, "Yo, he was like, how do you guys just take on a government contract like that performs these types of experiments on people?" And then his dad was like, "Well, it's situations like that and money and treatment like that allowed me to save your life when you had your accident." So I was just like, "All right, well then, can't be mad at that. That's pretty fair." But that's how they left it. So Cyborg is looking into it, and I believe his dad will share the files with him. And then I guess Cyborg and the girl at some point, they're gonna go back to Doom Manor and confront Niles, because again, Niles had a hand in that whole situation. So that was it. That was it. This was actually a pretty damn good episode. I enjoyed this episode a lot, and 6 episodes. I think we're only getting 9 episodes of Doom Patrol this season. I know last season, like season 1, we got 15, which is a weird number. And now I swear I think we're because when I check, because they post all the episodes, and they just have, like, on DC Universe, they have all the episodes locked until until like the week comes. I only saw 9 episodes. I was like, wow, this is a short season, which means this season finale, like, which means like all the budget was probably spent on the season finale. So this thing's gonna be bananas. And if that is the case, and if we're only getting 9 episodes, and this was episode 6, this shit is almost over. So yeah, thank you for tuning in. Leave your thoughts down below. Let me know what you think of my theories on Jane, my theories on the Rita situation. Let me know your thoughts on each character, like, the whole thing with Cliff, and and what's gonna happen next week. And like I said, we'll chop it up and we'll talk about it. This your boy, the Icon, signing off for another episode of Doom Patrol. Click the bell notification on YouTube so you can get notified when new videos pop up, like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I just did a recap for the WWE Extreme Rules pay-per-view for all you wrestling fans. And like I said, Stargirl coming up next, and we're gonna ride this wave until the end. So for Doom Patrol, for Space Patrol, take care, guys. And as always, until next time, I'm out this bitch.